A large aircraft carrying 239 How could it disappear from the Earth out of thin air? This seems impossible in modern society, but that's exactly what happened on March 8, 2014. Malaysia Airlines. The true situation of Flight 370. From remote control to fruit explosion in the warehouse. There are countless theories trying to explain this mysterious disappearance. But what if the truth of the matter is more disturbing? If it was someone on the flight, are you responsible for this? This is a story about Malaysia Airlines. The story of Flight 370. The content can be chilling, but maybe it can help us answer the truth about the disappearance of this plane. It was a clear night. In Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, the monsoon season is coming to an end. The weather in the region has also become calmer. Kuala Lumpur, Gate C1 of the international airport satellite terminal. A Malaysia Airlines aircraft. The Boeing 777 aircraft is being prepared for flight. The plane is loaded with fuel, food cargo, and 227 passengers, ready to go all the way for the next 6 hours. Voyage to the north. As passengers cross the boarding bridge, they don't know anyone. He is about to become an airline, part of the greatest mystery in history. Despite the various claims surrounding this page, one after another, but there is one story that stands out. This documentary is the first to present this perspective. Tell the full story. In the cockpit of Flight 370, there are 2 pilots. The 2 pilots will arrive in just a few days, become a people, subject of detailed study. This is First Officer Fahri Abdul Hamid. At the Air Traffic Control Center, apply for permission to fly to Beijing. For this 27-year-old young man, this is a very special flight. Flight 370 was his last training flight. After that, he will officially fly non-stop to broadcast 7 years ago in 2007 as a cadet pilot. Joined Malaysia Airlines. Started accepting a few months ago. Before the training of the 777 he used to fly a Boeing 737 and Airbus A330 aircraft. During this period, he has excellent test results. During the promotion process at the airline, his performance was rated well above average. In fact, he did a great job in training, so much so that the airline considered the flight. Just let him match for the captain, instead of the usual 2 captains. Seated to his left is the 53-year-old captain, Zahari Ahmed Kilt. Zahari became a cadet pilot in 1981, joined Malaysia Airlines. During this period, he has amassed over 18,000 flight hours. It was he who became the Malaysian Experience, one of the richest pilots. Zahari holds a senior position at Malaysia Airlines. In the past 7 years, he flew around the world as the captain of a 777. He was also responsible for training the pilots of the 777. It has been decided whether to grant them a pilot's license. Colleagues say Zahari is lively and knowledgeable. He is a true aviation expert. He spends his spare time flying a remote control parasailing plane and inviting colleagues to his house, practicing on his family's flying emulator. Flight procedure. But the identity of Captain Zahari, it's much more than just his appearance. It was almost 12:30 that night. Boarding bridge separation, 8 minutes ahead of schedule. The massive plane was pushed away from the gate. From then on, the plane became a sealed container, on its own power. There were 227 passengers on 10 board, flight attendants, and 49 tons of fuel. Then someone speculated the captain was carrying a lot of unnecessary suspiciously many fuel required for flight distance, about 30 minutes extra. But here's the thing, Malaysia Airlines regulations, all flights to Beijing must be joined. 30 minutes of backup fuel, so there's nothing suspicious here. Zahari will. The 777's interception method was departure to Kuala Lumpur International Airport, runway taxi again. Follow Malaysia Airlines procedures. The captain should be responsible for the ground and the co-pilot is in charge of operating the radio. After the plane arrives at the co-pilot will replace the captain. Fly a plane to Beijing. The captain is responsible for operating the radio. As the plane began taxiing towards the runway, passengers also settled down, trying to get some sleep. However, soon they will be awakened. 12:40 a.m. that day, airplane alignment on the runway. It's for kilometers of concrete and the dark night sky. Captain Zaharie, the huge Rolls-Royce engine, pushed to takeoff gear, then hand over control to co-pilot Fari. The plane began to thunder down the runway. Room! Fari lifts the huge plane into the night sky. Flight 370 embarked on its journey north. When the plane climbed, Zaharie contacted takeoff control. Okay, level 1A0 Relation 1370. In addition to approving the flight to climb to 18,000 feet, ATC also created a shortcut for pilots, allowing them to fly directly to the airline, a far waypoint. E-Cream. This degraded waypoint is different. It is one of the few on Earth. Waypoints surrounded by the airspace of 5 different countries: Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Singapore. What we're going to talk about next has a weird connection to it. The plane continues as usual. Climb the bright orange night scene of Kuala Lumpur. So behind, according to the flight plan, the plane will head northeast, flying over peninsular Malaysia, then fly into the South China Sea. Departure from the airport. Air traffic control handed over 370 to Kuala Lumpur. The latter is responsible for the upper part of the country's airspace. -10 cut temper Rita 13 to 69. Alright, 13 to 6 relation. 3 civic rounds. Zaharie will use this frequency. Enter his radio and made contact with the new controller. Relation 3. It was a clear moonless night. The plane is in good condition. There are few other flights nearby. Pilots only need to obtain final approval from air traffic control. Cruising altitude and you're fully on your way. Around 12:45 that morning, air traffic control clearance has finally arrived. Relationship 70 clamp. There will 350. Hello 350 Relations 3 Center. About 20 minutes after takeoff, Flight 370 has reached and cruising altitude 350, or about 35,000 feet. Then Zaharie went to air traffic control, made a routine report. After about 6 minutes, he repeated the report. The second report is actually unnecessary, but it doesn't mean anything. Sleepiness or simply forgetting could be the reason. From a passenger's perspective, Flight 370, everything from takeoff to now is normal, but the flight attendants are in the cabin. For passengers who are still awake, provide catering services, but most of the passengers are already asleep by now. And here's what happened. It could cause a lot of controversy. In this video, we're going to use a comms razor. The theory holds theories that require the fewest assumptions, most likely the correct answer. The following description is not final, but it is the best match for the known facts, and has gained some world authority. Institutional support. At 1:19, as Flight 370 approached waypoint, the Malaysian Air Traffic Control Department to contact Ho Chi Minh City ATC because they are about to enter Vietnamese airspace. This radio conversation between the media and the captain, reporting, because technically, pilot should read back the radio frequencies assigned to them so that the air traffic control can know. Did you hear their voices correctly? But pilots like Zaharie, who are familiar sometimes with the not read back frequency. So, Zaharie said only good night when switching to Ho Chi Minh. There's nothing out of the ordinary. However, what happened next started to get weirder and weirder. And that's where our interpretation begins. On the way to Kuala Lumpur Control Center, seconds after good night, Captain Zaharie asked Co-Captain Fari to go to the cabin, pour them both a cup of coffee. They still have 5 hours to fly at night. 2 cups of coffee to refresh yourself. The co-pilot walked to the pantry without saying a word and closed the cockpit door behind him. Coffee delivery. Usually, it should be done by the cabin crew. But Folly will not question this. Make your career. Person in hand. Now the captain sits alone in the warm cockpit. He's been rehearsing for this night for over a month. Every step of the way, every movement, it's been carefully planned with the utmost precision. Because Zachary challenges the impossible. He wants to make the world's largest, the most advanced jetliner disappear from the Earth. The irony is that this bulletproof door, it was meant to keep potential hijackers out, but the captain is now safely locked inside, can carry out his plan undisturbed. He reached for the flight bag behind his seat, take out a warm sweater and put it on, because he's going to need it soon. Sahari chose to make the plane disappear at this time, because in these precious few minutes, people on the ground, I'm not looking forward to hearing from this. The sound of an airplane. Malaysian air traffic control has handed over the plane to Vietnam. Air traffic control aircraft is busy that dealing have entered their in their opinion, Flight 370. It will take a few minutes to contact myself. So in these precious few minutes, Flight 370 is on the verge of everyone's attention is elsewhere. Sahari's first step in making the plane is to get him off the radar. To do this, he needs to turn off the plane's transponder, but he won't do it right away. If he turns off the transponder before reaching Eager, Malaysian Air Traffic Control Department, to detect aircraft from their radar from the screen. If he waits until the crossbar, it's really out of their jurisdiction. When the co-pilot was busy, while brewing coffee in the pantry in the cabin, Zahalizi stared intently and agreed. Because the plane is going at 8 knots per minute. Keep approaching. When the current waypoint at the top right of the screen, when agreeing to become the next waypoint Batar, he turns off the answering machine. Soon the plane arrived agreed, and start turning to the next waypoint. This is it. Zachary turned off the transponder. Flight 370 from Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and the Cambodian air traffic control screen disappeared at the same time. The first step of the plan is now complete, but Zachary didn't know a clue he left behind. This is how he spent the next few hours. The first of several clues left. Also an investigator. Spend years. A clue that was finally discovered. The transponder of a Boeing 777 aircraft full shutdown mode. Do not send any information to air traffic control. Altitude mode. Only transmit the location of the plane to air traffic control. But does not contain its height information. Fully open mode, i.e. transmit its location height and other parameters. Want to rotate to full off mode. The knob will briefly cross the closing height. What Zachary doesn't know is the moment the knob passes the closed height, the ground station received the location information of the aircraft. The altitude of the plane is 0. If there is a large-scale power failure in the transponders and other systems to fail, this shouldn't happen. Guess right. Because the location and altitude information should disappear at the same time. This brief transponder data is partially missing. Indicate that in the cockpit, someone manually pushed the knob to the off position. However, this clue, it won't be discovered until a long time later. In Zachary's opinion, the first step of his plan has been successfully completed. Since then, no one on the ground knows where Flight 370 is. The plane continues to divert to the next waypoint on the route. However, there is still one problem that has not been solved. After turning off the transponder, although Zachary can make air traffic can't see the plane, but Malaysia Airlines still knows. Plane in the air. Because the 777 is aircraft communication, patrol, and reporting system. Roughly speaking, every half hour, the system will pass the name SETCOM satellite transmit aircraft system status information back to the airline. The content of the report includes airborne maintenance status and the position of the aircraft on the route. Zachary guide. As long as ACARS is still working, he can't really disappear. So he needs to shut down the ACARS system. But turning ACARS off is not like turning ACARS off. If he turns off ACARS the normal way, he sends a message to the ground. It shows that it is shutting down. If your mission is to disappear without leaving a trace, that's not going to work. To truly disappear without a trace, The captain needs something more radical. He had to unplug it directly from the socket. Such a cart will immediately expire. Therefore, no cancellation information will be issued, resulting in leakage. Reached out to the panel above his head. With 2 fingers, turned off the generators on the left and right engines. This immediately cut off the power to all the systems on the plane, including SATCOM. So that's X, a satellite communication system used to send and receive information. People on the ground now, unable to in any way receive the message from the plane. To be sure, he's on the flight management computer menu again. Removed to methods of AWCARS and ground communication, satellite communications, and renal high-frequency radios. At this point, even if satellite communication is restarted, because there's no contact with the ground, in the eyes of the outside world, MH370 is at this point over the South China Sea. There is another advantage to shutting down satellite communication. Also, the next step in the plan is essential. This means that satellite phone in the cabin, entertainment in front of passengers, SMS function in the system will not work. Flight 370. All communication with the outside world has been cut off. To be sure, Zachary then turned off the plane's exterior lighting. Since then, Flight 370 has all disappeared into the dark night. All of this, it all happened in just a minute. And this is just the first step in Zachary's grand plan, although it has been successful. Make the plane disappear from the eyes of the ground personnel. But behind him, 238 people are waiting to be delivered to Beijing. Rich family is making coffee. He'll be back in the cockpit soon. Wants to implement all his plans. Zachary needs to somehow let everyone on the plane is incapacitated. For this, he was carrying an extraordinary weapon. Air is more precisely thin air. At 35,000 feet, thin air can only keep the brain awake about 45 seconds. So the air in the airliner is pressurized. It's like the gas in a can. It's compressed. The captain has a way to open a mouth on the plane. Most of the air will gush out. And fortunately, he can indeed do it. There are 2 valves at the bottom of the plane. It's called venting. Open these 2 valves. The captain can put the compressed air in the cabin, excluded from the atmosphere. The captain is ready. He reaches into the panel on the left. Take out the oxygen mask and put it on your head. Start delivering oxygen. Now he has his own oxygen supply. He reaches his right hand to the panel above his head. Stop the engine to deliver new air to the cabin. And he flips a switch. Switch cabin pressurization function from automatic to manual, so he can control the amount of air in the cabin. The gas supply system in his hands. It is the lifeblood of the 238 people behind him. Once he took the next step, there's no turning back. The next few seconds is the most crucial moment in his entire plan. As he rehearsed, Zachary moved his finger to both cabins to vent on the switch of the valve and pushed them to the open position. The 2 valves in the belly of the plane opened. As the air gushes out, there was a loud noise in the cabin. All the sleeping multiples, customers are all affected by the sound. Air pressure woke up. Their eardrums bulge. Oxygen masks automatically fall off the ceiling. A sudden gush of air from the cabin makes the cabin significantly cold. This further shocked the passengers. But not yet. Dazed passengers had time to put on their masks. The captain swerved the plane to the left. In the galley at the front of the cabin, in the passenger valve, I was thrown against the wall by this sharp turn. He only has a few dozen seconds to mess up. Oxygen mask found in. Otherwise, you will lose consciousness. The captain's turn was so sharp, so much so that the automatic chew alarm went off. As the turn gets bigger and bigger, the plane is approaching its limit, trying to maintain flight posture. The captain did this for a reason. He needs this turn to be as tight as possible because it is next to Thai airspace. And the last thing he wants to happen right now, entering another country's airspace without permission. Because even if he turned off the transponder, there's still a way to detect him. That's sequential radar. Sequential radar is the most basic radar, and it works very simply. Just by reflection. Radar antennas on the ground send out the signal is bounced off any object in the sky, including planes and flocks of birds, then back to the radar antenna. And because he works by making radio waves, it bounces off the surface of the plane. Therefore, pilots cannot avoid being detected by sequential radar. But at the same time, it is precisely because of the simplicity of the sequential radar system where things are, without knowing what the object is or how tall it is. If the Thai military finds an unknown violator airspace, they will probably deploy fighter jets, investigate who is the mysterious intruder. More than 2 minutes after starting a sharp turn, when Zachary gradually changed the plane to level flight, he looked at the position on the navigation display. He breathed a sigh of relief. He just managed to avoid Thai airspace. So Flight 370 started going in the opposite direction. Fly back to Malaysia. The first part of Zachary's mission has been completed, but in front of him, still a huge challenge. He must now cross peninsular Malaysia. At the same time, it will not be intercepted by the Malaysian. He must also ensure 238 people behind him won't ruin his plan. In the main cabin, passengers are terrified and confused. They put on oxygen masks. Listen carefully to the instructions of the cabin crew. The flight attendant told them there was a rapid decompression. They will soon descend to a height where you can breathe normally. In addition to the cabin getting cold and the oxygen mask, the situation seems to be under control. Noise levels in the cabin are back to normal, and the sharp turn has also been completed. The plane is basically in a steady flight state, but additional jurisprudence notes the situation is far from under control. On any checklist for cabin decompression, neither mentioned that the pilot should turn the plane around. Their first priority after putting on an oxygen mask, it should have descended to a height where it can breathe. No matter what happens ahead, must be unusual. Just after a sharp turn, Farillian rolled and sat into a cabin in the front galley in the flight attendant seat and took an oxygen mask there. He is ready to return to the cockpit, helping the captain with emergencies. But on the other side of the impregnable cockpit door, the captain had other plans. Passenger oxygen mask only provides about 20 minutes of oxygen. Here's why. This has left enough time for the pilot. Descend to a safe altitude allows passengers to breathe normally. It usually only takes about 10 minutes. However, what the passengers and crew were unaware of was the plane did not descend. They don't have much time left. Fuji Afari, go to the walkie-talkie near the front left hatch. Heart pounding. He's got a poop on his shoulder. Portable oxygen cylinder. This is what he took out of the cabin cabinet. He had a flexible plastic mask over his face, breathing heavily. Then he raised his hand and reached for the microphone. There are 15 of them distributed around the cabin, even when the garden is full, enough for each flight attendant. There were only 10 flight attendants on Flight 370. Therefore, the oxygen supply is more than sufficient. Unlike the masks worn by passengers, this oxygen cylinder can provide oxygen for 44 minutes. Exceeded the crew in any emergency that may arise. The amount of oxygen required, but this time the emergency, but it had never been envisioned. Fari was the only one on the plane. People who breathe using portable oxygen cylinders. Flight attendants follow the training requirements. Quickly sat down in the spare passenger seat or a dedicated flight attendant location. And there it is. I put on my shower mask for 20 minutes. But the situation in Fali is different. The cockpit is in desperate need of his help. The portable oxygen cylinder was when he tried to re-enter the cockpit. The only way to stay awake. He picks up the handle, press the code to call the cockpit to open the door, then put the receiver to your ear. In the cockpit, a message appeared on the captain's central display. Message cabin call. If Sahari wants to open the door, he just flips the switch on the center console. After rotating from the automatic position to the unlocked position, the door lock will pop. The indicator light on the access control panel then you can push the door open. Fari watched the indicator light on the panel flickering red light. Keep waiting. Captain, it should only take a second to open the door. Why hasn't it opened yet? The co-pilot thought. The captain must be dealing with some emergency. Too busy. He waited for a moment, and he re-entered the call code. Information for cabin calls appeared again on the captain's display, and he ignores him again. It's horrifying what's going on. The plane has decompressed. It's not going down. In the front cockpit, Something must be seriously wrong. On the other side of the hatch, Zachary is looking through the windshield, eyes on, looking ahead at the coastal city of Gotham. The orange light. This will be the starting point of his return journey across his home country. It is also the best place to execute the following plan. Next, he's going along Thailand, flying over the border with Malaysian airspace. So when the West Asian military saw the plane on radar, they will think that it has been. The Thai side took over. Also, when the Thai military saw the plane, they will think it was taken over by the Malaysian side, and Zachary judged. Even though they realized it was Malaysia Airlines flight after seeing him return from being alone, they may think the plane is at the emergency return because the plane seems to be towards Bingcheng Airport. In that case, aircraft should be handled by the Civil Aviation Air Traffic Control of Civil Aviation must be dealing with it by Malaysian now. Civil Aviation the plane Air Traffic handed over to Vietnam. They don't think about the plane anymore. Flight 370 is deep in no man's land at the same time. Locked out of the cockpit, the co-pilot can see, despite the decompression, but the plane still hasn't started to descend. He had a terrible idea. The reason why the hatch is not open. Could it be the captain because of the rapid decompression has lost the ability to move? But this is weird. After all, opening the oxygen mask is the first item on the list. It should be done before it starts to descend. Not to mention Captain Zahari, often on the company's flight emulator. Cadet pilots teach this knowledge point. He is more than anyone else more qualified to handle this emergency. How could he forget to put on his oxygen mask? But Farley didn't have time to figure it out. He must return to the cockpit immediately. He has one last option. The panel of the cockpit door accepts more than one password. In addition to the normal password, there is also a special password used when pilots are incapacitated, cabin crew, in rare cases where access to the cockpit is required. With this password, if the pilot doesn't respond after 30 seconds, the hatch will open automatically. Certainly, it's very easy for exporters to take advantage of this emergency code. To prevent this from happening, within 30 seconds of entering the password, pilots can choose from the cockpit. Refuse to open the hatch. This ingenious mechanism allows the crew to fly. Incapacitated entry into the cockpit. It also allows the pilot to refuse the operator. Enter the cockpit. The co-pilot trotted to the panel. Enter the emergency code. There was a loud buzzer in the cockpit. If the captain is incapacitated, the hatch will open automatically in 30 seconds. 10 seconds have passed. The co-pilot's heart reached his throat. 20 seconds have passed. After the last few seconds, the panel indicator is still red. A terrible feeling came over me. He enters the password again. Be more careful this time. He waited and counted down with his watch. However, after 30 seconds, the indicator light is still red. This only means that on the other side of the cockpit door, the captain heard a beep, then turned the switch to reject state. The captain looked at his watch. 1:32 a.m. He turned the 777 around. It's been 12 minutes. In about 5 minutes, passengers' oxygen masks will start to run out. Then, all 227 passengers will enter a state of hypoxia. The situation is similar for 10 flight attendants. They were still wearing seat belts. Wait for the captain to send a signal that allows you to move freely in the cabin. A state of hypoxia. In fact, it feels a lot like after Some drinking. People become dizzy and hyperactive. Some people get angry. Others become relaxed and content. Contrary to most people's intuition, you don't feel like you're choking when you decompress. It simply feels that thinking and perception have become slowly until complete loss of consciousness. Ironically, blurred consciousness due to lack of oxygen. You might not even be aware of it. They were deprived of oxygen. In the cockpit, Zachary carefully observed the surrounding sky while making minor adjustments to maintain the course. He's now back over land again, flying rapidly over peninsular Malaysia. He is already in this sky, flying around the clock for decades. He knows the terrain like the back of his hand. They can be easily identified. Towns online. Zachary knows. At the current rate, it takes about 20 minutes to fly over the Malay Peninsula. In flight, he will radio to the frequency of Kuala Lumpur ATC so he can hear the controller end. his plane call. At least for now, everything is normal in Malaysia.